So that's us getting started. Aidan, welcome. Thanks for coming on to the Red Talks for us today. I've known you for a wee while now, since I started coming through to West Lothian and stuff, and it's been really interesting getting to know you. For the viewers, I'm just going to say I'm not going to go into a big monologue about you, because we're going to find out more about you as it goes. But you've just written a book, Euphoric Recall, so I'm in awe of you for that, because I've been trying to write a book for about 10 years and I've not got anywhere. So I'll maybe get some tips and tricks off you.
No problem.
But that is about your recovery journey, but it's about your life prior to it and stuff. So we'll hopefully hear a wee bit about that.
Cool.
You've got two kids, to your fiance, and you're doing a MSc in social work.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
My God, you're a busy man, and you're an author.
Aye, there's a lot going on. Aye.
And you work. Where did you get time? Where did you get time for all that? And you're working on your next book, man. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
We'll maybe talk a wee bit more about that at the end, if you're okay with that, because that
Yeah, of course.
on. So, as I say, welcome. Do you want to tell the viewers a wee bit about how you got into recovery? So it might be a wee bit about, but we're focusing on the recovery journey. So how did you get to the point where you needed recovery, do you think?
I was getting caught up in a lot of violence, and the consequences of addiction were piling up more and more. Ultimately, it was a really violent thing that happened where someone tried to kill me.
Oh, wow.
And I went to my GP and was just desperate, and all that gift of desperation we talk about in recovery. Had the gift of desperation, and they linked me into another drug and alcohol service, and it was the drug and alcohol service where I got some counselling. And the counsellor suggesting being a very important word, he suggested that I might be an addict and directed me to a recovery meeting. And I went to that first meeting on a Tuesday night in West Lothian, and there was just one other addict there. Everybody else was doing a marathon that night, so that person went along, done their service just in case a newcomer turned up, and lo and behold, I did turn up. And it was just that person giving me a little bit of the experience and identification, and it was just the very first seed being planted in that moment. So
can I just check that out? That was a mutual aid meeting?
Yes, yeah.
And so there was somebody there that had been through addiction themselves.
Yes.
And they were able just to share that stuff with you.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that make you feel?
Less alone for the first time in my life. Because I used to always think it was just me. I thought I was just crazy. I thought I was going to die that way. I didn't realise that there was those kind of fellowship meetings either. I'd never heard of them before. So it opened up a whole new world to me, and it made me think that there was possibly a life beyond substances.
All right, that sounds quite exciting as well.
Yeah.
So you went to was it a mutual aid? Was the first one? Was it like was it a public service or a voluntary sector service that you went to, where you got the counselling?
It was a charity organisation, third sector.
Okay.
And there wasn't a lot of services around that I was aware of. There was really no visualisation for services to go to. I didn't even know they were around until the GP directed me to them.
Yeah. And then they helped you, they directed you to a fellowship meeting. Okay. So did you get it right away? Did you get recovery right away?
No, not a chance. I done the whole pink cloud thing. I done the whole identifying with folk, and I remember taking leaflets and going to my other pals that I knew that were addicts and taking leaflets to their house and hugging them and going, "That's it. Like we're going to these meetings. I'm going to save your life," type thing. I had the cape on and that, and what it did was it gave me periods of clean time, little pockets of experience of what it was like to have a life without drugs. And it planted seeds, and it started giving me connections to people who were out of that lifestyle. But it certainly didn't happen overnight. That was really just a seed being planted.
Okay, so that's interesting. So had you been a daily user pretty much? Had you been using on a daily basis prior to getting there?
by that point, it was pretty much daily, yeah, when I got to that stage.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So what surprised you about the kind of the mutual aid stuff, the the fellowships? What surprised you, if anything, about it?
Loads of things. I think what surprised me was the idea of abstinence. I know there's a lot of different people have different opinions over what recovery means to them, and I respect that. But hearing that you could live a life without any substance was alien to me. I grew up in a culture where all lads did was use substances. It was all we knew.
Yeah.
So that was alien. And to see people doing things with their life, hearing people talk about going to college or having a job they liked, or just the fitness, all different types of things that I couldn't do that. Even someone going on a holiday, every time I tried to do anything like that, I was always taking all my money away, and I couldn't even afford to buy myself a new belt. So to see people achieving different things, it was like, wow, there's a possible life after this. Yeah.
So quite inspiring, quite,
Yeah.
and I think for me as well, when I'd heard where people had been, and then to look at them now and think, wow, maybe there's a chance for me to be able to
Yeah,
do that. Yeah. Yeah.
100%.
Okay. So did you do everything that was suggested? Because I know in some of these fellowships they say get a sponsor, go to so many meetings and so many work the program, and did you do all that?
No, not right away. I still thought I was too young for abstinence at times, so I was in my mid-20s, and also West Lothian only had 2 of those kind of fellowship meetings. For that fellowship, there was only 2 meetings, and I could barely make it out of West Lothian anyway. I was so stuck in my addiction. So it really was when other more experienced addicts were taking me to our meetings in Edinburgh, Glasgow, that I started to get a bit more fellowship. But at that stage, I didn't do all the suggestions. But when I eventually got clean properly, I'd done all the suggestions. Yeah.
So you weren't able to work, or that you'd stopped working, or before you went, or were you, were
No,
you?
I was still working, because someone in my family had a really serious illness, and that person in my family passed away. And me and another family member both worked for this organisation, and they knew that the family were struggling, and I think they made a lot of exceptions for me, and
Oh, I see. Yeah,
I got a lot of paid time off. They had a guy for the Pride coming to see me. There was a long time when I was able to be a functioning addict, and
yes, yeah.
that chameleon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that surprises a lot of people as well, certainly in the general public, because they've got in their mind what an addict is. And it's usually the person that's kind of standing outside the chemist or that are, doing all that. They didn't recognise the fact that possibly the greatest amount of people who are addicted to substances and behaviours are still working and they're still functioning.
Yeah.
And some of them are passing legislation about us.
That's it, man. There's so many stereotypes over
Yeah.
what it is to be an addict, and I think it's a misconception.
But you say something else that I found really interesting as well, was that was about, I didn't think it was possible to give up, to go abstinent.
Mm-hmm.
And I've known many, many workers in the recovery field or in the drugs field who didn't believe that is possible for people, for their own clients, and but I think it comes from themselves, no being able to imagine themselves ever doing without alcohol or other substances. They just can't visualize it for themselves, and so then they can't see it for their clients either.
Yeah, I feel the same. I also feel like there's an attitude with some people that you're almost giving something up. But for me, being abstinent was the beginning of gaining so much, and that's something that maybe is not spoken about enough, is that people think when they're giving up substances that they're losing something, but they're actually, for me, gaining so much. That's what's happened to me.
So what kind of things would you say that you've actually gained as a result of giving up alcohol? Or giving up substances, I should say, because it's not just one or the other.
Yeah, I've gained an education. I've gained dreams. You know, my mum said to me that I always wanted to be a writer. She says that I wanted to be a writer, and I traded it in from my addiction. And then I've kind of just traded them back now. And now I'm finally getting to be the person that I probably always was meant to be. But I denied myself because of all that lack of self-worth. I never thought I was good enough to be a writer. Nobody will read anything I've got to write. So I've gained my dreams. And that sounds a bit cliche, but it's really true. I've got a family. I've got a job. I'm helping other people. I've got, a house and money in the bank and clothes on my back and the material stuff. But I've got freedom now. I think that's the one word I would use as an umbrella term, is that for the first time, I've got complete freedom.
What does that mean for you? What does complete freedom mean for you?
It means that my behaviour has not been dictated by traumas or addiction. That if I make a bad choice now, it's because I've decided to do something I shouldn't be doing. And that bad choice can be anything. It can be eating too much of something that's not good for me or whatever. And, I'm not a puppet on a string anymore as far as addiction and trauma.
So it gives you freedom to pursue other things to do. So in terms of education, what kind of stuff have you done?
So I went to college and done health and social care to start with.
That seems to be a really popular one with people coming out of recovery.
I can see why. It's a great course, and on that course my lecturers realised I was passionate about criminology and psychology and sociology, and the reason for that is because I was fascinated to discover why so many people end up in addiction and offending behaviour, why other people didn't. And I knew it wasn't just down to morally inferior human beings. There was a lot more to it than that. So I ended up doing social sciences at college and uni. I'm looking at all kinds of subjects, even subjects like history and politics and stuff like that.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So who helped you with all this kind of stuff? Because obviously you're putting a lot of effort into yourself, but did you have people to help you? And if so, where did they come from? Yeah,
so many people. If it wasn't for other people, then I wouldn't even be here. People in fellowship, friends in fellowship meetings, having a sponsor, my partner, my mother, the people that the lecturers I had at West Lothian College and then Glasgow Caledonian University, who educated me and built me back up. I also took on volunteering, and volunteering was a very important way to build up my confidence and my skill set and to give me connections and to network, and it was a great stepping stone into the career choices I've made and even writing. So I saw volunteering as an actual opportunity for myself, and that was another great thing that helped.
Do you mind sharing that? Because I've now been involved in the voluntary sector for 30 years, and that's how most of us got involved and found out which way we kind of wanted to go. So what kind of volunteering did you do?
I volunteered with victim support. I volunteered supporting victims of crime in the community, but the role I loved the most was I was part of the witness service. At court. So supporting witnesses, victims, and sometimes family members of potentially murder victims and stuff. And you would never ever wish people to be in those situations, but when they were in that situation, it was great to be there as an emotional support or a practical support. And I was also fascinated with the criminal justice system that we have and how that functions and operates. And I got to watch firsthand everything for High Court murder trials right down to traffic offences. So I learned firsthand all about the criminal justice system in Scotland.
I like that service. Because I do work in so many of the Scottish courts, I bump into the guys all over the country, and they're really, really helpful. Brilliant.
They're amazing.
People. Yeah, it's a great service. Okay, what challenges would you say you faced in your recovery? Anything that really you've come up against that surprised you even, or what?
Relapse.
Right, okay.
A challenge. Because
It's a big challenge,
things like that you don't really think of, like my ego at one point. When I got clean the first time around, I got a degree, had my partner, had my kids, had money in the bank, had a professional job, done the 12-step program, was sponsoring someone else, And then my ego said, you can go and party at New Year's Eve. And I had a very painful relapse. So that's the kind of unexpected challenges is sometimes yourself, but other stuff being like things I've managed to cope with by using recovery, deaths in the family. One of my close family members took a very serious illness. I wrote about that in the book, so I'm not going to go into specific details, but it was a very close member of my family that got a very serious illness, and that was unexpected, and having, especially my sponsor at the time, just really helped get me through that.
Mm-hmm. So for people who maybe know exactly what a sponsor is, do you want to share a wee bit about that?
Yeah, so it's obviously someone in the recovery scene that has done a 12-step program as part of a fellowship and uses their experience to sort of guide you. It's kind of like having a mentor. Mm-hmm. And these relationships, I think, can be different depending on the people in them. For me, a relationship with sponsors about someone you can talk to, not just about like substances, but about what's going on in your life, because it's that stuff that triggers you, or certainly it triggered me. So it's a bit of a mentor, having a mentor to guide you through the program, and a friendship as well.
Yeah, that's interesting, because not all recovery programs or ways of working involve a sponsor. So I think it's quite an interesting one. That notion of mentorship, it can be really helpful as well. So what would you say, has been, things that have surprised you, perhaps that you wouldn't have expected, to give you? So you mentioned ego that caused you a challenge, like, caused a real. Has there been other things that you've come up against and you've overcome? And
like one time I was involved in a job that wasn't a great job, and I had to basically whistleblow, and I was made unemployed, and I was a bit of a scapegoat and left. I got nothing but an apology in the end, and I was left with those feelings of injustice, and this isn't fair, and it's no right. And I guess in the past, as a using addict, any injustice would be like, right, I'm going to go and score now. That was a massive injustice, and it was one where I didn't do anything to deserve it, and I had to take it on the chin, and I had to regroup and not feel sorry for myself, and I had to get back up. But you know what? That led to me writing the book. So it was either do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that just goes to show the difference between being in recovery and not, because in the past I'd go and score and I'd just be back in a cycle of addiction. And this time I thought there's a bigger plan now, and a few months later I started writing this book.
Do you mind me asking, how long did the book take you?
So the first draft took 9 months between sitting down to just type the first word to finishing the last word. But then obviously with editing with a publisher and getting a contract and that, it's about 2 years in the making. But writing the first draft of it was about a 9-month process, and I was doing that whilst working and being a dad. So
yes, absolutely. I interviewed somebody who's going to be on, I think, next week, and she published a couple of weeks ago, and hers took 9 years.
Wow.
9 years for sitting down, for first having that idea, to kind of procrastinating a bit, and then other life issues and all that kind of stuff. So, but it was fascinating. That process of writing a book, so I've interviewed quite a few people, including people like Gabor Mati, and I talked about how that was for them. That and almost everyone says to different degrees it feels cathartic. It feels that doing it actually gets a lot of that stuff out there, and we often say that in recovery as well, as shining a light on that, those kind of secrets and stuff. There's something liberating about that. Is that your experience, or any different?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it sounds cliche to say that it's cathartic, but it's so true. It really was cathartic, and anyone that reads the book will see that I've actually not left anything out. It's very detailed. I've gone into everything. Within context, not just for sensationalism. It's within context of the story, but I've never felt more free in my entire life. I'm not saying people should run around spilling their secrets to everybody, but for me, I'm in a place where I'm in a healthy place when it's done in the right way, under the right circumstances, and it serves, I think, a greater purpose telling this story. So, it's definitely very cathartic. I've had similar experiences where I've done this in a more private way with a sponsor again, where it's one-to-one and it's done in a private, safe environment, or in therapy where you're talking to therapists and you can speak in a confidential environment. So, but for me personally, this has definitely been cathartic.
So that's really interesting as well. I mean, so you've been around in the active addiction scene, you've been around in the recovery scene, you've been involved in criminal justice and stuff. So I'm going to ask a wee bit of a kind of pointy question here.
On you go, man.
What do you think about I mean, I've seen, and I've been involved myself for a long time now in drug policy reform, trying to push for drug policy reform. What's your thoughts on that?
I think the Misuse of Drugs Act 1971 is an absolute disgrace. I think that it's outdated. It was created a long time ago by people who looked at drug use as social deviance. Yes. I think there's a model in Portugal, which is, it's not a perfect model, but it's a very, very progressive model. Yeah. And it has shown that you can change things drastically. There are places like in Canada, Denmark, Spain, they're doing all sorts of projects where they're treating it as a health problem.
Yes.
And they're getting positive results, and it's what we call evidence-based. I think so much more can be done, should be done, needs to be done. There's, before the virus came along, the massive endemic being talked about in Scotland was the drug death crisis. Yeah. And we're at the worst point ever in our country, and there's never been a more relevant time to tackle these outdated policies. And I know there are good people in Scotland trying to chip away at that and fight for it, and they're getting batted away. I also think that cutting ADP budgets has not been a good thing, but the Scottish Government's obviously recently started to try and address that. But more can be done from every angle, in my opinion, without trying to point the finger at people. But this Misuse of Drugs Act 1971 is the most outdated policy going, and it needs to be changed or people are going to keep dying. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, thanks for that. Not a million miles away from my aim, to be truthful. And I'm somebody that writes about the Misuse of Drugs Act almost every month, certainly on a monthly basis when I'm doing reports for the courts. I still do expert witness for the courts in drugs cases, and to see the amount of money that is wasted in Scotland on trivial amounts of drugs, and people end up incarcerated. It's still something like over 60% of all cases in Scotland are cannabis. It's like this is a complete and utter waste of everybody's tax and the impact that it has on families and individuals and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm up for that. So what do you think about drug consumption rooms then?
I'm for them. I think that if it's done in the right way, and there's also options for people to get referred into our services and recovery kind of treatments, then it's safer. It's safer for people. I believe these are facilities that have been tried and tested in other places and had positive results. Again, there'll be downsides, there'll be other circumstances where it's not all going to plan, but from the evidence I've looked at, it seems to be something that's worth doing, that's making progressive changes in the places that are using them. So
yeah, again, the same. I mean, I visited them in Vancouver and in Germany, and very, very powerful messages. It was interesting. You deliberately used the term evidence-based. So our drugs policy is definitely not evidence-based. It's one of those policies.
They sack their own experts that tell them to change it, don't they? So.
That's right. Yeah. Aye. And it's fascinating to see all that stuff. Even when Tony Blair was the Prime Minister, his think tank looked at the drug policy and looked at the possibility of drug policy reform. When they came forward with their ideas, they didn't publish them for 2 years. It wasn't till The Guardian leaked them And then it became obvious that people were saying, you know, our drug policy is an utter and absolute failure to do what it's supposed to be doing. You know, it's no protecting communities, it's no reducing the amount of substances on the street or the harms that are being caused by substance use at the moment. It's no, and in fact, you know, I think they found that they were interdicting less than 5% of the drugs that were coming into the country, and it was costing them exponentially more money every year for a completely failed public policy.
Yeah.
If that was housing or you know, education or anything, a public policy that was failing so absolutely drastically, they would be kicked out for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I say, they've got the advisory council, and they've had experts that were the chairperson of those councils that they've pushed out because they don't like the advice they're getting for the experts that they brought in. So what can you do with that?
Yeah, Professor David Nutt.
That's the one, man. That's the main guy.
Yeah, interesting character as well. And okay, so there's all that. So in Glasgow at the moment, there's a mobile consumption room which is kind of hitting the headlines and stuff like that. What do you think about that?
I think he's a hero, man. Yes, I think he's a hero, and I'm on his side, and I hope that there's leniency shown to him if he's getting pulled up for it. Obviously he is, but he's doing it for the right reasons and
absolutely
helping people.
I met the lawyer from, I think, Denmark who set them, you know, who just that's what they had to do. They had to go out there and push it. Otherwise, it was never going to happen.
That's it.
So that's good. That's really interesting as well. So what would you say has been your high points in your recovery? You've mentioned some things, but I'd be really interested to find out what were your high points.
I definitely think getting educated, because I left high school thinking I was daft. So getting educated has been good. Some of the jobs I've had, some have been very frustrating roles and some have been very great roles. The ones that have been great, when I've actually managed to do some good work, has been rewarding. My 2 kids and my partner, it goes without saying, even something as simple as having a cup of coffee with my mum, going to Costa for a coffee, because it's like, again, it's a bit cliche sounding, but I stole her peace of mind so often that to sit down for a cup of coffee and a chat and to just be at peace is amazing. And to be doing this book, this is more exciting than any hit I ever had on drugs. And I never thought I would ever be able to find something that I would be so passionate about, that was rewarding and that wasn't damaging, that, you know, I don't have to go see a dealer for it. Do you know what I mean? So there's loads of rewards. And again, there's all these cliche sayings, but they're there for a reason. But, you know, the journey continues, and I had no idea I'd be doing any of this stuff. It's way beyond my wildest dreams, way beyond it.
So have you had kind of role models within the recovery movement that you've looked towards, or is that a thing? I mean, is that even a thing for you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think anyone that's trying to change their life's a role model. Anyone that's trying to better themselves. I've seen people do all sorts of things, whether it's just something simple like they find someone they fall in love with and they go and get married, and they can do that without having a substance in them. It can be people that are involved in like Munros and marathons, or getting educated, or someone that's just able to laugh again and get a sense of humour again. It could be someone that's working in the field or someone that's not. There's a different variety of people that I look up to for different reasons. There's someone in particular who I won't name them, but it's a person who's gone through a lot of loss and a lot of trauma, and time again, that person gets challenged by life, and then they just fight back. They get hurt and they get wounded, but they fight back and they stay clean and they keep doing their recovery. And I find that kind of resilience remarkable.
You see it all the time in recovery as well, don't you? It's like,
aye.
Have you ever heard that come across that saying that, you know, in recovery, you know, these big issues, you know, like bereavements and stuff, they're not the ones that get you, you know, they're not the ones that cause the relapse. It's all the wee ones. So we didn't trip up over the elephants, it's the mice we trip
No, it's the guy driving up your backside. That's the kind of thing that gets you. That's what happens to me.
There was a guy, I don't know if I've told this story before, but it was at the first AA meeting I ever went to, and the guy was for West Lothian. He was a big, and he was doing a share, a big red face, like, you know, like a kind of, like looks like a kind of alcoholic for one of these seaside postcards for the 1950s or something like that. And he was an amazing character, and he was talking about how he had got up that morning and he was completely serene. You know, it was a beautiful morning, and he was a traveling salesman, like, you know, and the birds were singing. He came out and he lit onto his neighbour, and it was like, man, you know, recovery is so brilliant. He was about 5 years in recovery. Recovery is so brilliant. Got in the car, and as he went down, before he got to the first set of traffic lights, this boy racer overtook him in a wee kind of hatchback, you know, and cut him off. But they both got stopped at the lights, and he was screaming at the guys, and he was going to get out the car, and he was like, he turned into this raving lunatic.
That's what happens,
he was
man.
like, you know, and the guy pulled away, and he was left shaking, and he thought, where did that come from?
Yeah.
We've still got this kind of lunatic living inside us, like,
Yeah,
you know, and it can happen that quick.
100%. Yeah, it can be. You can get over all the large stuff. Like I said, I've lost family members and dealt with it with dignity and got through it and used the tools of recovery. And then, like, somebody can make a smart comment one day, and it's just all out the window, man. Spirituality is gone.
He thinks I'm a Raj. he thinks I'm a fanny.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
So what how do you maintain your recovery then? Because that is the thing. You do all that work, get coming in, and it seems overwhelming at times, but you get through, and it kind of takes over your whole life. But how do you maintain your recovery today? How does Aidan keep himself okay?
I think just keeping a good balance. I've always stuck to meetings and service. And for anyone who doesn't know service, like setting up meetings and chairing them and getting shares and stuff. And I've always kept close to recovery, and I've got friendships from recovery. And recovery to me also can mean other things, like a whole bunch of us meet up and we'll do a Munro together or meet for coffee. And I've got people I consider in my recovery that I met through education, you know, and loads of other positive things that I do. So I try and maintain a good balance. Some weeks that can go ski whiff if something else is taking up a lot of time. But ultimately, I always try and bring myself back to having some balance in my life and staying close to my recovery. That's what works for me.
Aye, that sounds, that notion of building up other things I mean, you've obviously, you know, about the stuff around recovery capital, you know, the stuff that you build up. And I was talking to a friend today on the chat the day, and we were talking about that need for to have things, you know, that really interests you, you know, whether it's, and his is kind of now running and cycling and kind of going to spiritual sites around Scotland, you know, standing stones and all that. Amazing stuff, you know. And it's so people think it's all about putting down the substances, when in actual fact what you've described is that kind of opening up, almost that freedom to go and do these things and be things that you wanted today. Has there been any things that you've done that you wouldn't have even thought about before? I mean, that you wouldn't have known that you liked?
Doing like, I know a lot of people are doing it now, so it's like the in thing, but doing them on those. I never would have seen myself as being a hill walker or that. I used to, back in the day, I had to look at people that were hill walking and thought, look at these dafties, man, climbing hills and taking care of their health and fresh air and nature, what's that? And now it's one of my favourite things to do. And even, I know I've said it, but even something as simple as going for a cup of coffee with someone and getting my caffeine hit, because I've not gave that up yet.
Oh, man. You're certainly looking like a hill walker now, like, you know, the beard and the beanie and stuff like that. But I know that was an important element in my life as well. And if people are talking about spirituality or spiritual feelings now, that getting to the top of a mountain or being in a beautiful part of nature, you feel it here. There's a reason why, in yogic terms and other terms, why this feels like it's your heart and that's connected with something greater than you. But doing Munro's is a fantastic way experiencing that, and having a wee bit more of a challenge and stuff as well. So what's the best one that you've done?
Do you know what? I don't even know the names of them all. I just go with I go with the guys that know what they're doing and let them take me. I went to Ben Ann. That's not technically a Munro, but I think because it was my first one, it was just breathtaking. Like when you got to the top, and not only was it breathtaking for me and my friend that was doing it, everybody up there was buzzing, and it was like the last time I saw that was when everybody was taking speed together years ago and dropping speed bombs together, but it wasn't buzzing in a good way, whereas this was buzzing in a natural way, and folk were all taking pictures for each other, and people were respecting the area. Nobody wanted to drop a tiny bit of litter at all because they all had so much respect for where we were, and it was just a connectedness with people and with nature. And I sound a bit airy-fairy, but that was the first one I've done, and I think it's probably my favourite for that reason, even though it's not technically a Munro.
Yeah, no, I absolutely get that. It's brilliant. One of my favourite bits of the walks is getting to my picnic, getting to the packed lunch, but I take some really nice food with me these days.
Yeah, lovely.
It is good. It's really, really good. Okay, so we've kind of covered a lot of ground in a short space of time. Is there anything you're looking forward to now? I know we talked at the start about the new book that you're going to write. You want to talk a wee bit about that? Is that something you're looking forward to?
Yeah. I've already wrote 4 chapters of that book. This new book's going to be fiction, so I can exaggerate the truth a little bit more. I can, when you're writing a memoir, you want it to be as close to the truth as possible based on what you remember. But with a fiction, you can have a bit more fun with it. So it's based in West Lothian. It's based in the early 2000s, and it's capturing a time when I feel like there was a lad culture, because a lot of lads just didn't know who they were or who they were supposed to be. And there was at the same time, the trance scene was kind of dying. And there was just a bunch of former trance goers and young ones that wanted to get into the trance scene that was no longer there. And there was all this drugs and not a lot of hope. And so I've captured that, I think, and I've based it on the people I grew up with, because I realised from writing my memoir that you don't really need to invent characters when you grew up with so many of them. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And the working class streets of Livingston, when Livingston was first created, or within the first 20 or 30 years of Livingston, there was a hell of a lot of characters. And so I've been able to play with that a bit and exaggerate the characters and make them do a bit more outlandish stuff. But it is a message. It's a message about kind of hopelessness and despair, and that these youngish lads don't really have anything to aspire to. And of course, there's a whole bunch of trance references all the way through, and hopefully people for that generation get a bit of buzz out of the references. So I'm 4 chapters in. There's a swear word in the title, so I don't know if I'm allowed to say the title in the interview. But
well, if you've seen me doing these before, you know that's sometimes all I ever do.
Right, all right. So it's called Where the Fuck is Phil? And basically from the very first paragraph to the last paragraph, I want the reader to feel like they're having an ecchi trip. And it's based on a character called Phil, and something goes down straight away. And it's a bit of mystery thrown in as well. And after the first book, I've now got confidence in my writing, whereas before I didn't. For years, I thought it was something I liked doing that nobody would really believe in. And now that I've got a book, it's like, all right, maybe I'm all right at this, and let's see where it goes. And I didn't want to do another memoir. I was like, they'll read the first one, be a bit pretentious of me to do a second book about my life. So I thought I'll do the book based on the people I grew up with, and I'll capture a moment in time, and I'll tell a bit of a story, and I'll have a bit of fun with it as well.
Yes, yeah. So that's the other thing. That's the thing that I missed out, and I kept wanting to come back to it, which is that notion of fun, because you do like to laugh. I know that, but everybody thinks when I tell them, if I tell people I'm in recovery, and it's almost this kind of sad wee face comes on them, like, you know, they didn't understand the humour that's in these fellowships and that's in
Yeah.
recovery. And I've talked about it before to other people, but for me, it's almost exactly the same. It's almost exactly the same. It's very similar to the dark humour that you get in the military, you know, where your life's, or, you know, a lot of or on building sites or in these kind of places, even in factories. I've found that kind of. Was that what you found, you know, in the recovery journey?
Yeah, I think humour's, when you've gone, everyone that ends up in recovery has gone through traumas, and possibly we've hurt other people as well. It's like laughter's a relief, and it's also, you laugh when you identify with someone. So when someone tells a bit of a war story, and they tell maybe a story of something they got up to, and you laugh at it, that's kind of like, oh man, it wasn't just me that was like that. That's hilarious. I used to think it was just me. And then you can also laugh at it because it's not your life anymore. So I do, and we were doing, like I say, the Munros, and there was one guy doing the Munros who's a bit of a big joker, and he's well known for it. And when the Munro started getting really tough, his humour got us through the tough parts. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's why humour is important in recovery, because there are tough times, and humour can help you get through some of that.
I liked all the wee sayings, like, you know, which I couldn't, my brain was so scrambled when I came in. I found it really difficult for some concepts to stick, you know, especially if they were too long. But if there were wee sayings and they were said loads of different times, they imprinted on me. But there was one that was, somebody reminded me at the day that I hadn't heard for an awful long time. And my mate's in A, and he says, the definition of an alcoholic: somebody who tells a lie when the truth would have been perfectly okay. Or perfectly adequate.
Aye, we like to complicate things, don't we?
So listen, it's been brilliant talking to you. I've loved it, absolutely. Is there any advice you would get? Right, so you know this old kind of trick that they do, the technique. So Aidan's just coming into recovery now, and you've got the chance to talk to him. What would you say to them? What would you say?
I would tell him to give recovery a chance, because the addict I go on ways, I want everything sorted by yesterday. So I want to be 2 days clean and have a degree and a wife and 2 dogs and a cat and kids, and I want to be famous and all that shit, man. I think, be patient, be humble, persevere, and don't give up.
Oh, brilliant, pal. Brilliant. Thanks so
John.
much for agreeing to do this. And we'll hopefully get up. So your book's published tomorrow, is that right?
It comes out tomorrow, 1st October, so people are pre-ordering it. In fact, people are getting it today, so it's actually arriving now. So
how would somebody get a hold of it?
They can go on the website of Guts Publishing. They can put Euphoric Recall into Amazon. They can get it from Waterstones. There's going to be other places stocking it soon as well. And once they do, I'll put it on social media. And I think if you just Google it in, you'll find places that sell it.
Well done, mate. I'm really, really, I was going to say proud. How could I be proud of you?
Thank you.
I love your story, and it is. I suppose it is. That, you know, so I know what it's like trying to write a book for me, and it's so challenging, and yeah. But I'm looking forward to it. I only started it, so I've not been making references to it because
no problem.
But I want to get right through it. So lovely to talk to you, man, and thanks so much for doing it. And indeed, you're an inspiration to others, mate. So thanks so much. And
thank you.
I shall catch up with you later. So I need to work out how to stop the video.